This is Technically Legal, podcast about legal technology, innovation in the legal industry, and the impact tech is having on the law. I'm Chad Main, the founder of legal service company Percipient, and on today's show, I'm talking to legal tech entrepreneur Nathan Wenzel about the changing paradigm of launching a legal startup in 2026 and his new company, LegalOperator.ai. On today's show, I welcome back Nathan Wenzel. He's the former founder of SimpleLegal, and he's now the founder of a new company called LegalOperators.ai. After exiting from SimpleLegal a few years ago, Nathan packed up his family and moved to Hawaii. Something I guess I never would have considered until I talked to a resident of the islands is that if you live there, you learn pretty quickly that you're at the mercy of the Pacific supply chain. As you're going to hear from Nathan, some days you can walk into a Hawaiian grocery store looking for milk, and the shelves are just completely empty. But how did Nathan even get to Hawaii? In the 2010s, he was living in Mountain View, California, the epicenter of the tech world. And being in the epicenter of the tech world, it sometimes felt like he was living in the future. He tells me that even back then, he'd look out the window and see 3 or 4 Waymos sitting at a single stoplight. And not surprisingly, in Silicon Valley, everyone he knew was consumed with work. Pretty much every conversation started with the same question: what startup are you working on? So, what startup was Nathan working on back then? It was a legal operations and data analytics company called SimpleLegal. He launched it in 2013. And for 6 years, he was working on a heavy, slow growth slog. But they eventually hit their stride, and the software became so sticky that corporate clients were literally putting SimpleLegal contact instructions into their automated out-of-office emails. So fast forward from 2013 to 2019, and a big PE firm started noticing SimpleLegal. They made an offer, closed the deal, and a few years thereafter, Nathan exited. Now, after a successful exit, many founders take their money and ride off into the sunset. And Nathan kind of did that. He headed off into the Hawaiian sunset and moved his family to the islands. But even living out there in the middle of the Pacific, Nathan didn't leave his entrepreneurial itch back on the mainland. Like everybody else, Nathan's been watching the explosion of generative AI. But interesting to Nathan about these advancements in AI is that he realized the status quo of how enterprise legal software is built, priced, and delivered is changing fundamentally. He's going to tell us that the days of charging corporate legal departments, or really any enterprise departments, hundreds of thousands of dollars for software is over. Today on the show, Nathan and I are going to talk about what it means to launch up a startup in 2026, and he's going to fill us in about his new company, LegalOperators.ai. He describes it as an AI-driven legal department chief of staff, and it plugs in directly to how teams are already communicating with each other, be it Slack, Teams, or any other messaging apps. Using the app, instead of forcing a sales rep to hunt through an outdated SharePoint drive to find corporate legal documents, they can just type a natural language question right into LegalOperators.ai. But not only are we going to talk about his new company, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about what it really means to build a lean, sustainable company in 2026 and how that differs to back in the day in 2013 when he started SimpleLegal. We'll dive into the reality behind the buzzword vibe coding. We're going to talk about why AI transparency is going to force software pricing down, and how Nathan is planning on navigating his second major act in the legal tech space. What's it like living on the island?
It's different. There's different things that maybe you kind of expect, and then some that you're aware of, and then some you don't expect. So things you might not expect, like stores run out of things, right? Like Whole Foods will just not have milk. So you think, oh, I need to go get milk today. You'll go and you're like, oh, there's no milk today. Like, all right, I guess I wait a few days. That happens. And then, there are things that, like you're far from everything, right? I mean, it's a 6-hour flight to the West Coast, but it is closer to Asia. So we get over to Japan, we get to Taiwan, we go to New Zealand and Australia. And then it turns out the flights to the rest of the US aren't actually that much longer than just flying to LA or San Francisco. You end up getting pretty far north and kind of come down. So you hit the narrow part of the earth. That ends up being not as bad as you might think.
Well, that's cool. So no regrets, I take it.
It's interesting, right? You go into San Francisco and you see all the Waymos driving around, and you talk to everyone in AI, and you're like, oh, okay, this is like, here's where we're living in the future. And when I used to live in Mountain View, I mean, we were, I don't know, like maybe a mile and a half from Waymo's headquarters at the time, and you'd see them driving around all the time. And you'd be at a stoplight with like 3 or 4 at the same stoplight. And this was before they really, definitely before they were taking passengers and before they had really, launched to the public. And so there's a certain amount of living in the future that you see in the Bay Area. But yeah, we're pretty happy out here.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. If there's one thing you miss about the mainland, what is it?
There's plenty, like Mexican food is one. That might be a little more unique to kind of California and Arizona. But I'll tell you, we've actually found that it's been easier to meet people here than it was. We'd meet plenty of people when we were in Mountain View and when we were in San Francisco. It was definitely very work focused. The question's always like, what startup are you working on, or where are you working? Out here, it's a little different. And so we'll meet people and not have any idea what they do for work.
You don't care either. You're just out there. He's living, right?
Yeah, so it's different. It's probably not for everyone. I actually had a couple of people on my team that had grown up out here, and they had kind of both told me, hey, if it doesn't take, like if it's not right, just move back. Like there's no shame in it, right? Because they grew up here, and one of them, and it happens a lot, kind of wherever you are, you kind of pull through high school, and you're thinking, I can't wait to leave, right? And so one of my employees comments, she said, I couldn't wait to get off the rock. And so she moved to the mainland. But it was the same thing when I lived in Arizona. There were plenty of people from Seattle that had come down to Arizona. And then I knew people who had kids they grew up in Arizona and they moved to Seattle. It was just grass is always greener somewhere else. And so, people like to explore.
Well, that's cool, man. So you just mentioned like what startup you work for. We're going to get to some new stuff you're working on, but tell me what you've learned since the exit. Like, let's talk about leading up to the exit. What have you learned? Is there anything you didn't expect when you started the company? Like, tell everybody about the Simple Legal kind of trajectory.
I think you could kind of divide it into these like chunks of long slog and slow growth at the beginning, just, really trying to get the product down, then hit our stride and really just kind of took off growing. And then you get through that initial kind of mania and you have to kind of change the course of the business a little bit to get to a little more sustainable levels of just expense and growth and change. And it's interesting. We got to a point where, we were releasing product and customers would say, okay, we need the releases to slow down. And it was just like, wait, but we got to keep moving forward. And it says, well, we have business process and you're part of our business process. And so when you make changes, it impacts us. I'm like, oh, okay. So that was an interesting stage of the company where you get past that initial kind of manic growth point. You now have something with, several $1 million of revenue and sustainable business and, customers that have been with you for, 5 years. It was really interesting. There were some fun key moments, like being part of their out of office reply, right? Like we'd send someone an email, get their out of office, normal stuff, they're on vacation or whatever. And our emails or our app would be in their out of office. Like it was important enough to them that even if they were out, they had to route certain things based
That's
on,
what you call sticky. That's a sticky app, right?
yeah, yeah. So that was exciting. And then, you get into each stage of the company, whether it's a fundraising round or, when we got bought by private equity, obviously it was very different. So we got bought by a company that was about 3 times the size that we were. And so they're sort of that much farther along and that much further with in maturity of processes and things. And that was actually a lot of what I was looking for. Initially my thought was with the next fundraising round, but then private equity had approached us and made a pretty good offer. So went for that. And the kind of operational rigor that we inherited was a new thing. And it was great. I mean, I was really happy that it was part of what we were doing. And it also let me focus really just on, talking to customers. That was really my favorite part of what I was doing.
Remind me again. I know you're with the company for about 10 years. When did you get bought?
We launched in 2013 and we got acquired in 2019. So it was 6 years, almost to the day, 6 years. It was 6 years to the month with that. And then I stuck around longer. It wasn't an acquisition that shut down the company. It wasn't an acquisition to just buy the customers and transfer them over. I mean, the company's still going. They've done some of the things, from the outside, now they've done some of the things that myself and my co-founder were suggesting to them early on, which was to combine a lot more of the elements. And then once I was part of that company, I continued to run Simple Legal for a little while, but then transitioned into kind of the parent company and helped them look at acquisitions and incorporate other companies in. And so it was many pieces, and then they've now kind of brought it all together under one brand, which I think is a smart move. And it's been exciting to see. it's interesting. All the people that we had hired, there's some still there. Some have gone on to start companies. Some have gone on to create and run at new companies whatever department they were a member of at my company, which is fantastic because you see these people grow. Like they grow their careers, they grow their lives, they get married, they have kids, they get a house, and then they go and lead a department that they were a member of. So whatever playbook they saw with us, they're now implementing, and have implemented at other companies.
Do you keep in touch with most of them?
I keep in touch with a few. I wouldn't say most. I think we had something like 65 people. They've reached out. I've reached out to some of them. I follow them on LinkedIn and Twitter and kind of keep tabs on them just because I care every once in a while when someone is, maybe they're moving or they're, for one reason or another, they're looking for something new, and sometimes they'll reach out, and it's always great to hear what they're up to and what they're doing. I mean, I think the most rewarding part of a company, it's the people you're around and the things that you can do to advance their lives. I mean, you certainly want to help your customers, you want to create value in the world, you want to do all these things so that you can have this company. But whether it was SimpleLegal or the company before, we had a consulting company in the legal world, which was how we got introduced. We were a data analytics consulting firm, and I had someone relocate to get married. I had someone relocate from Alaska to Boston, which was the thing that she really wanted to do. We had someone else come back into the workforce, after being out from having kids for a little while. We had someone make a kind of later stage career change, right? She was kind of had been at a larger company for a while and was looking to join something smaller and do something new. You can enable all these things for people, right? And, you know, that's the thing you remember most is what you can do for everyone. And that's always the most rewarding part when you look back at a successful company.
Is there anything pre-exit or pre-acquisition Nathan didn't know or didn't expect from post? Like, what's something that surprised you or you just didn't know?
I mean, it's all new. It's different. I mean, PE is a different way of operating. One of the main things I think is there's not just PE. There's different levels. There's growth PE. There's a basically transition PE, and then there's this like ongoing, just pay me a dividend PE. And so we were bought by growth PE. The idea was not like, okay, let's squeeze this thing for cash and gut it. They wanted the company to continue to grow, and so that was, I don't think that's what you hear. You always hear the horror stories, but they push us to continue to grow. And then, in theory, you get to a point with that PE where if you sort of build it around this rule of 40 idea where you look at growth and profitability, they're looking for rule of 40 growing and get the business self-sustaining. So they're not putting in more cash. Unlike VC-backed world where they're like, grow, burn money, don't worry, we'll keep writing checks. But the PE world is like, grow but do worry and get sustainable. Then you get to that next stage where they say, okay, we're going to take you from this 40% growth and break even. We want to start to shift that to be more putting out cash. And so having that growth, you basically grow organically and inorganically, and then they sell to the next PE. That one then shifts the company into let's generate cash. And then after it's made that shift, they then sell it off to the next PE, which is just the like, let's just get cash from this thing. Like, let's have it pay a dividend. Like, if I bought a stock on E-Trade or something and you just want the dividend. And so those different stages of PE were interesting to learn about. The process of acquiring companies was interesting. I mean, I certainly went through it on the receiving end. And then, we went out and acquired companies. And so that was an interesting process and seeing kind of how that works. And there's a certain amount of it that PE does all the time. And so they're quite good at. And then there's another amount of the actual messy integration. And there are formulas to it, but it comes back to people. It's still people, right? You're still bringing people together, people who have fear of, is my job going away? Is my function going away? Is my product going away? And so working through all of that was an interesting process.
Well, he says interesting. It didn't sour you though, because you're building something new and in legal. So tell us about it. It's Lexiomatic. I guess question number one is, before you tell us what it is, why legal? Why are you sticking with legal? Because you're not a lawyer by training. You've been in legal for a while, like most of your career. It hasn't soured you on it. You're still here.
So the first thing that's exciting here is to better reflect what we're doing and how the software operates and how the company operates. We've actually updated the company name from Lexiomatic to LegalOperator.ai. And so it is the legal operations chief of staff that sits alongside the legal ops team or the legal team. There's doing legal work, right? The lawyers and some of the things Anthropic can do now, and some like where it's evaluating the documents, right? Where it's doing those things. What we do is more kind of the operational layer of it. And so I've been in operations my entire career and data analytics and all these things. And so when we initially set out to build something, we actually didn't start in legal. We built out a product that would help with the hiring process, because I always loved the end of the hiring process where I was talking to people, but I always hated the beginning because they just get buried under piles of resumes. And AI has made it worse, because you can. I had a friend who helped someone he knows apply like 150 jobs, and she got back something like 60 or 70 responses. And so then she's able to kind of pick and choose. But AI on both sides is a tricky scenario. We built a great product. Founders loved it. They told us they found people they wouldn't have otherwise found. They got through the pile of resumes and they got down to the 5 people they wanted to talk to. It was great. But our thesis was you could do away with applicant tracking software because AI will tell you these are the 5 people, and then you don't need software to track 5 people. You just email them. Well, it's a crowded market. I talked to the founder of one of the earlier ATS companies that had been acquired, and he said, well, look, the minimum viable product to compete with one of these companies is their entire product. You can't come out and say you don't need this product. So it was a great product. It just getting traction wasn't working. And so we shifted, and I had been toying around with this AI help desk because at every company I had been at, there had always been at least one person. Everyone knows who this is, right? In their company. It's the person that's always on Slack or always on Teams, always answering questions. If you're like, how do I do this thing? You're like, oh, well, let me go ask this person. It may or may not be their department, but they know everything, and they are just tireless in answering and solving problems and doing. And that person has to be protected because they don't regulate themselves to say no. And I always thought, legal has this. There's all these policies, there's all these documents, it's all language, it's all words. And so AI can do this quite well. And we should build the bot version of this person. We should build this help desk. And there's more to kind of go from there. It can go and do more. But that's what I wanted to do, was protect that person by giving them kind of an AI front end so that they wouldn't be the ones that get bogged down with just everything, right? The faster they respond, the more they respond to questions, the better they are at their job. Their reward is just more
Right. People
questions.
get used to it.
The reward for good hard work is just more work. And so there needed to be a way to protect them from this. And then all the lawyers and paralegals and legal ops people doing the real substantive work, and then they get pulled in, right? Like, yeah, I think a lot of people have like a love-hate relationship with Slack, where it's like, it's great. It just speeds up communication when they need it. But it also means that they're just a shoulder tap away from being pulled out of whatever they're working on. And so that was kind of the idea, that just it wouldn't go away. And so
When did you start thinking about this?
this would have been October, I don't know, summer of 25. I mean, it was always out there. I sort of knew it was a thing. I mean, at one point I thought, well, we'll just, build it more general purpose, and it'll just be in Slack, and just when you answer a question, it'll know that, and then it'll answer that same question next time, because it's the same questions over and over and over, right? We'll just have it, it sees one question, sees the answer, and it's like, oh, cool. And then it'll just answer that question the next time around. But we had a fair amount of knowledge in legal. I think while there's a lot of competition now in document management and contract management and document processing and contract review, I think it's a lot of basically frustrated analysts who are very smart, and frustrated associates who are working like crazy, went through a lot of school, are really smart, really good at what they do, looking at the way things currently work that they're new to. And they're like, we need to change this. And so they write software. But there's not as many in the matter management space and in the legal operations side of it. I mean, I think SimpleLegal started in 2013. Bright Flag started around the same time. They just got acquired off into another company. And, LawView is certainly out there on the matter management side, but they've been around since around the time that SimpleLegal started. There's not as many in that side of the house. And so we thought, okay, this is the opportunity and it's a space we know. Let's build there.
Explain what it does. You'd say, because one thing is, hey, is your products easier than Slack and a lawyer? And you mentioned Slack. You think about building for Slack. So explain what it does.
We definitely have tons of apps on our phones. We have tons of apps in our jobs, and learning to use an app is not on anyone's list. In fact, even using an app is not on anyone's list, right? People kind of are where they are and they want things to work. They want what they want when they want it. And I don't think that's too much to ask. There's no reason that you should have to figure something out. No one taught me how to use Netflix, but I can watch movies, right? No one taught me how to, use Facebook, use Instagram, use any of these tools. And so there's no reason that business software shouldn't be the same way. Now, maybe without,
Especially legal.
yeah, especially legal software, maybe without all the, sort of fanfare around it and kind of just like semi-addictive measures in the, in some of the software. But there's no reason that people shouldn't be able to just say, like, this is the thing I want. And so we thought, okay, if you sort of think like, let me put constraints on this thing and then I can figure it out from there. People don't want to use an app. Okay, so what if there's no app, right? What would you do? What if there was nothing that they had to learn, nothing they had to log into, nothing they had to do? All right, well, there's got to be something. So will they communicate what they want today? They want it right now. So instant messaging is the way to go, whether it's Teams or Slack or Zoom chat. They should just be able to ask. All right, well, then you tell them, well, follow these steps, right? Go to this place, go to the, all right, well, can we get rid of that, right? Well, what do they do right now? Well, they just ping someone, right? They go into the legal channel. Legal departments try to funnel it all into one channel. And so great, like they'll have an Ask Legal channel. They can go in, ask their questions. They don't have to know the product even exists. They will use it without knowing it. Now they'll know when they get an answer, right? They'll ask. So it's an AI enabled help desk. As an employee, as a non legal employee, you might want to know, oh, can I give these payment terms to this customer? Or I'm trying to buy this product. It costs this much money. Like, do I have to go through procurement or how does that work? Does it need legal review? They're going to have this kind of data, but not that kind of data. All these things that legal departments have written down, have put on their company intranet site, have put on their Notion site, have put in SharePoint, Google Drive, whatever. All this stuff exists. But if your job is sales and your quarter is to hit a quota, you don't have time to go read all these docs, especially if they can change. They're very well written, they're very well put together, they're very informative. But if your choice is I can go out and work a deal or I can do this other part, you're going to work the deal. It's kind of the way it should be. And so we make it so that you get the benefit of having read the docs. So you go into the legal channel, you just say, hey, this customer wants this liability limitation because they said they got burned on it before or something, can we do this? And it'll go read the docs and read the policies and answer back what's in the policies. It doesn't pass legal judgment. It doesn't make things up. It doesn't know, right? We give it an out so it has a way to raise its hand and bring in a lawyer and say, hey, we don't have a policy on this. Let me bring in a lawyer. It can assign it to the right lawyer, so you don't spend time allocating tasks out, and you don't spend time looking at a task that, if you're a trademark attorney and someone's asking about liability caps on a commercial contract, it gets it to that person. It doesn't interrupt your work. And so this AI legal help desk, it's the front end that takes all the work that legal has done to write down their policies, and it automatically answers the questions that come in. If it gets a question that's not covered, it raises its hand, it brings in a person. If the work is, real substantive work, right? You upload a contract like, hey, can we sign this contract? It handles matter intake. We get rid of all drop downs because the conversation is there. I don't need you to type in the customer if you've already given me the contract that has the customer's name in it. So it handles all of the kind of like basically the typing, the reading, all of the answering, all the matter intake administrative steps for you so that you can just focus on the high value legal work. And so that's the AI help desk for legal.
How do people access it? You mentioned the legal channel. Does it sit in Slack or is it its own standalone? Like, how do people access it?
Yeah, so we'll put it into Slack, Teams, Zoom chat. there's a bot that sits in there. And so the administrator of the system, someone in the legal department, legal ops usually, will just add it in to that channel, and it will tell it, okay, listen to this channel because this is a questions channel. And then when the users come in, they just ask their question. They don't have to remember to tag it. They don't have to remember any of these things. They just do what they would do if they were trying to contact the legal department, because they are. They're basically just having a conversation with the docs. So they come into Slack, Teams, email, Zoom chat, type in their question, they get a response back, within seconds, and everyone continues on with whatever it is they're trying to accomplish.
I know you're onto something good because it was a couple months ago, I was down at Future Contracts in Miami, and I won't name the company, but there was a lawyer from a very big company. And I think the question to her was like, what do you want from AI? What's the future state? And she literally said, I want a box. I want to ask a question. I want the AI to look everywhere and give me my answer, instead of me having to like tell it. So I agree. That's where it's going. And that's how it should be, I think. But going into this company, you have a little different theory on pricing and where software is going and what it takes to. I've seen many posts, and I talked about it before we start recording over the last couple of weeks, is where historically enterprise software is charged hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not more. Your theory is it ain't like that anymore. And SaaS companies shouldn't expect to charge like that. This has been the status quo forever. So if I'm a company making millions of dollars on enterprise contracts, and now you're telling me that the market's going to push me to charge less, how's that going to happen? Like, why do you feel this way?
It's interesting. So first, it's not just about less. That will happen, right? And it has happened. The first time that I had the experience building software, we went out and bought a server, right? We went out and bought like a piece of hardware. We bought a server, had to learn Unix to be able to spin it up and make it work. We bought a server. And so you have these capital expenses that you then have to recover. Then you move into the world of, well, there's cloud, there's AWS. And so now, like, okay, I can just rent a server, but I still have all this other work to do. I have infrastructure, I have code, I have everything else. And so that brought prices down, and it changed the nature of how software worked. It changed from typically a license and a support contract into a subscription contract because you didn't need to recover this massive cost up front. So the prices changed. It wasn't just lower, they changed. And so now that's going to happen again. And when you think about how software scales, how companies scale, it's different. And so the world that had existed and that I was a beneficiary of for a long time was SaaS software would run 80, 85% gross margins. And to be honest, even when I was in that world, I never understood how it existed. I never understood why that was sort of allowed by market forces to exist, right? You have the sort of famous Jeff Bezos commentary of your margin is my opportunity. He stepped into that world. And I said, okay, well, he's a smart guy. I believe that to be true. He built a company based on it. It's one of the largest companies in the world. And yet software can run 85% gross margins, right? And it's tough. It's sort of like, well, the first customer has to cover the software and then all the rest of them are free. I used to work at a shipping company and they owned a fleet of airplanes. And it was like, well, the first package on the plane has to pay for the plane and everything else rides for free. Obviously that doesn't work. You have to cover all of your fixed costs. Well, in a world of AI that can write code, it's not even AI that has taste or AI that has design sense. AI can run design and it can understand what best practices have been and it can implement those in your product, but it writes the code. And so now I can scale not only the number of concurrent users by, increasing my Amazon payments, but I can increase the scope of what I do as long as I have the taste to, make it work well, the user empathy to make it work well for the user, and the ambition to go out and take on everything that is available to take on that makes sense in one package and turn it all into a box that you can just ask a question and get your answer from. But I don't have to go and write the code. I don't have to scale a bunch of different teams to make it happen, despite all of the focus today on forward deployed engineers, which is really just a way of saying, I have technical professional services, right? I have people who understand the business, and then they go out and do professional services. They implement the product, right? Despite the big, push toward that mode, you can have AI do a lot of these things, right? And when you're migrating data, when we used to do that at different companies, and a couple companies ago, it was a data analytics company, so we were always migrating data. And it was always people, and it was always, okay, get it into this exact format, clean it up, and then go through it, find all the errors, fix them. Well, AI actually does quite well at managing that, right? Because it basically moves text around. And so it's not just lower prices, it's the way a company, a vendor is going to have a relationship with the customer. The idea of a ticket that goes in and it goes into a big long queue of feature requests that like maybe in 6 months gets, evaluated, that world has to change. Customers know that they can build all this software themselves.
I want to ask you a question about that too, because the premise is that like you don't need 15 coders anymore, where someone can vibe code something, right? But you agree though that vibe coding is cool and it can do a lot of stuff, but still there's a place where you need professional computer developers to kind of clean it up and make sure it really works like it's supposed to for security and integrity, whatever. You agree that there's still a need for that, right?
So first, let me say vibe coding is fun, right? And like it sort of ends there. Vibe coding is this unfortunate name that sort of came into existence. What we do has nothing to do with vibes, and it's not hand coded. Vibe coding was like, it's a catchy name, right? It's like, I don't know, it sort of came into the world because it was fun, and it was around the time that was like probably what people were doing, and they were vibe coding little personal apps and fun things, and they would, kind of 80% work, and that's all you needed. You're building something for yourself. But vibe coding has nothing to do with the way that software is built today, like real software is built today. There's no vibes. It's all specs. It's all written down. It's everything that you would have done with a traditional development team if you were unconstrained in your budget, unconstrained by time, unconstrained by market forces. You would document everything. You would document every edge case. You would write every test. You would write everything down of how something's supposed to work. But no one ever did that, right? No one wrote everything down. No one had 100% test coverage. No, like, people talk about it. It was always an ideal. It was never anything anyone did. Well, now you actually can. You can document all these different pieces. And so you don't spend your time handwriting code. You spend your time getting the spec right. You spend your time getting the definitions right. You spend your time getting all of the test coverage and the edge cases and everything else. You spend your time there. It's just a progression of what's been happening for a long time. First, buy versus build has always been a thing. It has always been the case that existed. Before, you had to buy because coding was a dark art. Setting up a server was a dark art. It was, this unknown black box, hidden, unavailable to you thing. Well, now coding's available to you and servers are available to rent, and there are tools out there. You don't even need to get the server. You just get the app and you put it up there, right? Replit is probably one of the most successful platforms for this because they handle the database, they handle the server, they handle the load balancing, like they handle all these pieces. And so buy versus build continues to this day, but you're still not going to always choose to build. It's just that the barrier to entry is a lot lower, right? Which is part of what changes the relationship. That's the key thing is the buy versus build hurdle got way lower on the build side, but it's still there. So now you have this vibe coding idea. Well, and this, I'm old enough that like I used to go visit my dad's office and like organize punch cards, right? And these were the programs of the day. And I would put these big round tape discs into these giant, there's a room full of these computers that would put them up. But you don't write code that way today. You don't write binary. And even when you would write, say, Python code, the computer didn't run the Python code. It compiled into this Python C, which then compiled into machine language. And so now what you have is the English language compiling into code, which compiles into machine language, which the server runs. And so when you write code, when you handwrite code, it is deterministic. I write this for loop, this happens, right? But now when I write in the English language or any other language, it's probabilistic. And this is where people get into a lot of trouble. Okay, this is what vibe coding is all about. Is I describe something and then something works on the other end. And I think, cool, it works, it's done, it's a product, right? Well, it's not a product, it functions, but it doesn't do everything that you need it to do. It's not secure, it's not going to handle edge cases, it's not going to handle errors, it's going to hallucinate, it's going to have all these problems, but it functioned, right? And so that's where vibe coding came from. And it was catchy as a name and awful as a strategy. But you can, okay? And people can see what's possible. And what vibe coding has brought, the best thing that has brought to the industry is transparency, right? People now see, okay, I understand more about when I ask for a thing, what it takes to deliver that thing. And so the expectation on the customer side should be much higher now. It should be much higher. And the question is not like, oh, do I have capacity to build this thing? It's, is this the direction the product should go? And if it's not, the customer should rightfully, and the vendor should hopefully be helpful in helping that customer make a different decision for their product.
So what I'm hearing you say is there's a lot of people out there say, well, cost of building software is going to go to zero. Literally, someone's going to be able to go to the box and say, hey, make me XYZ app. But you're not quite, doesn't seem like you're quite a proponent, or you don't totally agree with that based on what I'm hearing you say, right?
It's not going to go to zero. Some of it is the cost of scaling the software, the cost of operating the company. I mean, the most expensive part of building basic software at this point is the security around it, right? And the like the SOC 2 certification, right? Like that's oddly more so than the product itself is the security around it, but that's an important part of the product. I think the real key is not so much like, does it go to zero? I don't think it goes to zero. It comes down for sure. And it's really the incremental pieces that come down. That's why you're seeing a lot of companies, they're expanding what they're offering because you're really only constrained by your ambition at this point. If you previously had the idea to go build something, you had to have a bunch of resources around building it. Well, now you can marshal all of these kind of AI resources to build it. And so you're really constrained by your ambition, by good taste, by user experience, right? Those are the things. And so if you look at bringing transparency into the process of building software, it goes from this invisible, this is super secret thing into no, you now see roughly how to create software. Just like today, like I'm not personally going to review a contract and tell you about it and tell you what's good and what's bad because I'm not a lawyer who's seen, 10,000 of these things, and it would not be a good idea for me to tell you these. But instead of saying, I don't know, I hand it to a lawyer and then magic happens and then there's some words that are changed. You can use AI to evaluate what they do. You can use AI to move toward what they do. It's not going to do what they do exactly.
You're talking about vibe lawyering.
Right. But there are a lot of parts of that contract that are not necessarily legal decisions, right? Like if you have a payment term requirement of it's got to be net 30, we're not going to go higher than that. You don't need a lawyer to tell you that 60 is higher than 30, right? But you have transparency into it. And so you see a lot of these companies now that are running legal help for lawyers. There are some that are running AI first legal companies that seem to be doing, I know they can't practice law, but they seem to be doing things that kind of really maybe straddle the line a little bit. It's bringing transparency, it's going to bring costs down, not because lawyers are less valuable, not because the cost of legal services go to zero, but because the transparency is there. And so now there's more visibility. It's the same for software. The transparency is there, there's more visibility to how it works. And so customers should expect more from their vendors. They should not expect pricing to scale along the same dimensions that it had before. If you have really good software that is that box that just answers questions, right? Well, that can scale without needing to add a bunch more support, a bunch more implementation, a bunch more custom, like without all the other pieces around it. And so your pricing should not scale the same way either.
Let's talk about that. So I'm going to throw out a number. Let's say that in the old days, you were $100 million company, and let's just assume the value of the dollar is the same then as it is now. What you're saying is costs are coming down, so pricing is going to be different. I think if I had to guess, your answer to this question is going to be, well, you're going to be able to get more customers because it's less. But how do you get to $100 million if you can't charge as much?
There's, kind of saying in software, but really in all business, is like revenue fixes everything. And that's like sort of true. I think really is profits fix everything. So first, to achieve the same level of If your costs are lower, then you don't necessarily need as much revenue. I think this is the shift that is what has everybody really worried. I think this is when we see a commencement speech at the University of Arizona and AI gets brought up and the audience starts booing, right? There is a fair amount of fear, as there should be in the world, right? Because it's unknown, not because the world is coming to an end, not because commerce is coming to an end, but because it's an unknown. And we've dealt with these throughout history. And so, how do you operate that way? Well, I think this is the big challenge that is in front of legacy companies. In the past, it was they had hard to use software. I mean, there's a reason that like in your financial software, the GL codes are a certain length, and that's the length that they are, is because these were built for mainframes. And so then all that propagated forward, and there was this difficulty. Well, if you have companies now that are built around one type of organizational structure, and that has to change, it's very hard to make that change as a company. And so I don't know if a company that is currently running a business a certain way with a certain cost structure, a certain revenue structure, a certain way of charging, a certain way of building software, a certain way of delivering software, a certain way of supporting customers, I don't know that they can all make that shift. I think that's going to be where the opportunity is for startups across any industry, is to build the modern company. And it's going to be painful for the legacy companies that are in place. They will make the changes they need to make. They will employ AI. They will demand from their vendors that AI is employed. I've seen, smaller companies that I've been associated with, they will know somehow that AI is going to change the way they work. They don't yet know fully how that will happen. And they're smart enough to know it's not necessarily a top down, like chief strategy officer says, this is what we're all going to do. They know it's going to come from their team. And so they'll have like AI lunch and learns. People just show off things they've built for their personal use, for their work use, for anything else. Some of them are just ideas, some of them are functioning things, and people will learn how to use it. And so there will be a transition period that is always difficult. It won't have a start and an end. I mean, AI has been around for a while, but with the chat services, Chat GPT and Claude and Gemini, it made it much more available to everyone. That's when it really got brought to the front. And so that's the change that companies are going to see. And I think just like in legal tech before, where there were no APIs, right? There were none. And in fact, when I had launched SimpleLegal, it was one of our competitive advantages that we had APIs and software could talk to
Yeah,
us.
absolutely.
Having an API is not really a competitive advantage anymore. It's just table stakes. Well, that's what companies are going to start to do now. They're going to look to their vendors and say, okay, how are you using AI? How do you make AI available to me? The idea that you should have to learn software is completely wrong. I get very frustrated now if I'm using software and I'm just like, okay, I want to add a user. I'm like, all right, wait, how, like, I don't do that a ton. Like, where do I, okay, like, it's probably admin. Let me go there. All right, is there like user management? Okay, let me go there. All right, what do I have to add? I don't want to do that. I just want to tell the software, hey, add this user, add Chad, and it'll do it. And so, like, that's what our software does now is, there's just an AI assistant that rides along with you. And anytime you want to do something, you just tell it, right? You tell it, hey, this person's going on maternity leave. I need to switch all of the items assigned to her over to this other person, right? Great. This is the change. Is that what you want? Yes, done. I don't want to learn how to have to do that. Right. And so the companies that are driven by their own demand for setting an expectation that is high, that is how a lot of them are going to make that transition. And if you don't, if you have vendors that don't, then it's going to be a lot harder.
Moving away from the fact that stuff's cheaper now to build. You don't need as many people. Maybe you don't need as much knowledge as you did prior to do this. Let's step away from that. What are you doing differently now in 2026 as you're building versus what you were doing back in 2013 when you're starting Simple Legal, as the stuff you're doing to actually build the business?
So first, we'll sort of bridge that gap. We won't step away from pricing just yet. Number one is pricing should be transparent. One of the difficulties with software historically has been it's difficult to know how much to charge a customer, not because you want to, squeeze them for all they're worth, but because you need to understand what's going to go into it, what kind of work you have to put into it to understand how much to charge. Well, if AI is doing a lot of this work, a lot more pricing can become transparent now. And so your pricing should be public. So that's a big one, right? Our pricing is public. It's on the page. It's definitely lower, but it's public. It's visible. You don't have to talk to someone to figure out, okay, well, gosh, what is this software going to take? All right, I have to charge this much to kind of cover the costs. So that's a big one. The other one is we keep the team pretty lean. I think constraints in a VC backed world, once you've built something that people want, you want to go unconstrained, right? And so there's tons of money poured in, and you don't have to think about profitability. You don't even have to think about a sustainable business. You just think about growing the business, knowing that, well, one day I'll make that shift. And so I don't know that that's like, you see it in the VC backed companies, the fundraising amounts, like it's gotten a lot harder to fundraise. It's all about basically AI kind of core services. On the app side, VCs know the prices are coming down, right? It's the vendors that exist that have to maintain the prices high. And so they're not funding as much. And so you have to build a leaner company within constraints. It will help you build a better product. It will help you serve your customers better. And it will help you build the company and the product for today and for tomorrow instead of the company that had existed in the past, where the formula was you build something that kind of works and you get some people to use it. You raise some seed money to finish building the product. Once you have the product built and you have people starting to use it on a repeatable basis, well, now you raise your Series A. And then what do? You hire the sales team, you hire the go to market team, and these are all very important parts of the company. But you just pour money in unconstrained, and that's not the healthiest way to grow a company. If you're Legora and Harvey, like maybe that's the right way to go. They're fighting for $150,000 plus contracts, and it's kind of winner take all world. And then they're fighting against Anthropic. Like they better get out there fast. And then you sort of deal with the cost overhang. Like that's next year's problem, right? I don't necessarily want to build a company that way. I mean, I made a mistake, arguably, in SimpleLegal when I was first fundraising. I had in the fundraising deck, raising our seed round, coming out of YC, we will grow slowly. And we will have these step growth functions that will happen, but in between, we will grow slowly, which was like the dumbest thing that you could put in a fundraising deck is we'll grow slowly. But it is the kind of company that I want to build, is a more sustainable company that is priced the right way, that is structured the right way, that builds product at an amazing clip, but doesn't go in unconstrained, just pouring in money where one day you either fail or just go through some serious pain to right the ship. It's much better to build a sustainable company. With that, we have our AI help desk for all the employees. We actually have expanded now into an AI help desk for the lawyers. And so it's a much smaller audience, but you connect up all your old systems and emails and other pieces. And now if you're like, hey, didn't we do a deal? It was like a trademark thing in France. We were launching a new product, and it'll come back with all the docs and all the decisions and all the memos and, say, here you go. So it builds this search internally. And it's not providing legal advice. It's giving the lawyers the tools they need. We have the matter intake. So we're able to just iterate fast on product, but the company is sustainable. The company is what's built to last.
Nathan, I appreciate your time. Best of luck with your new endeavor. If people want to get a hold of you, where you want to send them?
LegalOperator.ai is where the company lives now. And I have offered to people, if they are thinking, hey, maybe I should like vibe code something like this. I think fantastic. I think this is the new version of open source. I will tell you how to vibe code this. I think that my team can build something, better. And if we price it correctly, you'll use mine, even if you could vibe code something yourself. And so if people want to reach out and say, hey, I want to learn more about vibe coding in legal, can you show me how to vibe code what you built? Absolutely. Code is free, right? And so if I basically give you the tools to make the code and it's better than what I built, then, I deserve to be sort of pushed aside, and you can use your own tools. I mean, I think the excitement around these tools is what's really interesting. You look at Mike OSS, right? This tool that came out, and it's a frustrated associate who's like, this guy knows like this is not the way that software and vendors like should operate. It shouldn't work this way. Let me see what I can do. And he built one over the weekend. Now, a bunch of people gave him a hard time because, oh, it's not secure, it's not this, it's not that. And he made a few mistakes. He said, oh, it's all on your own system. Well, it is, except you still ship it out to an AI model. You still ship it out to, I think he was on Vercel and Supabase. Like, yeah, you're still using all these cloud providers. But here's the thing. One guy over the weekend built some version of what's out there. That tells you what the base models can do. That tells you what the coding tools can do. That tells you what applications can do. And so that's the critical thing to take away from it. Not, oh gosh, let me throw out this thing that has had tons of investment and time and thought put into it, and I'll replace it with a weekend, side project. But the excitement around it, I think, is key. And so, yeah, if people want to learn how to vibe code this thing, I mean, I don't have the time to take them through, a semester long class, but if we want to hop on a call and I can tell them some of the, the key things to watch out for and key things to put in there, I'm happy to do it. Last time I did it, she's like, this is great. I've learned a ton. I don't think I should do it. I think I should just use what you have. Like, yeah, that's fantastic. Whatever works.
Okay, that's a wrap for today's episode. As always, we really appreciate you listening. If you want to subscribe, you can find us on most major podcast platforms like Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, etc. Also, if you like us enough, I hope you leave us a favorable review. Thanks again for listening. Until next time, this has been Technically Legal.